first time I came back into Jethro, having retired, I parked the car and there was an immediate smile on my face. It felt like I'm back home. Here are the people who got to know me really well, and I got to know them really well. And it felt like, oh, I'm coming home again. It definitely became family to me. I think at the beginning, people wondered, what is she about and who is she? My name's Olive Hobson, and I worked in the Jethro Centre from 2011 right through to the end of March 2021. That's the longest time I've ever stayed in any one job. So I think it says something about how much I enjoyed working in the Jethro Centre. I think that was part of my role as a good relations person in Jethro, was to make it a welcoming place for everybody. And I think we succeeded in many ways to do that, to make people feel very safe and very welcome, no matter what background you came from. Conversations, that was my main focus, has been my main focus, especially in Jethro. Have the conversation. Take the risk of inviting that person in for a cup of tea. And again, it would be the cafe. I mean, hospitality, and I suppose that's a Quaker thing as well. Hospitality is huge. Sitting over a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or having a walk together, as we did in later days. You know, walking and talking. That's the way we have those conversations. And the wondering, might we do this? Might we do that? I remember one great lady, she was in Tagnavon Youth Centre, and she said, why don't we? What about? And that's how it began. What about? The what aboutery stuff. I was trained when I was working with the Parades Commission, and that's my first dipping of my toe and sometimes sinking into what community relations was all about. But I was trained in mediation. And you know, I thought then, I've got the answers to everybody's problems. Mediation is the answer. Well, by Jove, was I not going to learn some lessons? Mediation, yes, I think it is a good training, but it's not. It's not what good relations is all about in any means. Whenever I'm even talking about this stuff, I can feel my face light up because I am passionate about it. And I'm passionate about it because we don't need to repeat our past. You know, and we all need help not to repeat our past. I mean, I'm as liable to repeat my past as anybody else. But hey, I need your help not to repeat it. I need other people's help, and other people need our help. So if we look at it in that way, in that generally supportive way, how can we not repeat this? You know, and even, you know, when there was a bit of iffiness there recently, you know, a few of us peacemakers of the older strain would say, how can we help people not to go back? So there's a passion about peace. Not easy. Building relationships with people who think very differently is not easy. I mean, I will be honest and say there are many times I tore my hair out and thought, where is that person coming from? I just don't understand it. In good relations, you'll take one step forward and you'll take three back. Well, I sort of thought, right, how can you take one step forward and then go three back? By Jove, did I not learn that? I can think we're going places, and then something happens and I'm away back. For me, good relations is about seeing things from a different perspective. It's not easy truly walking in somebody else's shoes. Because first of all, there has to be a level of trust with that person for them to even allow you to know that much about them. I don't think my father meant to be a bigoted man. However, he was a bigoted man, but he never meant to be. But just in the way I was brought up, like nobody else was on the right path except us. My world was very tiny growing up. I mean, it was the farmhouse and the farm, school, and back to the farmhouse. And Dad had a wee shop, and that was it. So it was a very tiny world, and I had a tiny mind in those days. Like, my mind was not blown open to anything except what we believed, and we believed that we were the only ones on this earth that could be right. By Jove, that's a hard thing to get over. In those days, you didn't question your tradition or your religion. So I think I was a bit of a questioner. In fact, I would go as far as to say I became a bit of a problem child or a problem teenager, because I suppose I broke every rule that there was to be broken in our home. I went to Trinity in 1971. Dad died in 1969. If Dad had been alive, I don't think I would have been allowed to go to Trinity. I was living in Moy at the time in what was called in the middle of the murder triangle. We were constantly hearing of people in our area that, you know, had been targeted for whatever reason on all sides. We lived directly opposite the police barracks, which also became the army barracks. And I was travelling up and down the Mahon Road maybe 20 times a day, collecting kids, going to my own work, passing through army barracks every time. There was a mortar attack on, well, it wasn't meant for our estate, but it was set up on, as far as I know, on the road into our estate. It was set up to hit the police station and the army barracks. And our little boy, he was the only one at home, Ben, our youngest, he was sitting in his high chair. And there was this almighty blast. And it's a bit of a blank, but I remember getting Ben out of his high chair anyway with all the glass around him, and then carrying him outside and realising there was one house had been badly damaged. And then, of course, I mean, the whole community were out and we were wondering and that sort of thing. And the next thing, there was the army. The soldiers came to the door and said, "You're going to have to get out." I'm still curious about how did that actually, maybe subconsciously, impact on my future choices in life. But I think it's only on reflection that I can now see those things as a bit of a shift in my mindset to thinking about the Troubles. We started, I think, in October 2008, and we would have gone to Omagh, I think, twice a week, and we ran a series of listening meetings with people who had been impacted in any way by the Omagh bomb of 1998. So this was 10 years on, and the idea behind it was Omagh District Council wanted to kind of bring closure after 10 years, because Omagh was still being seen as the bomb town, and they wanted to kind of try to move away from that a bit. So they wanted to create a garden and also a memorial in the centre of town. So we were tasked with meeting many of those, now by no means all of them, but many of those who had been impacted. What I've learned is whenever I'm listening to somebody and they seem to have a dilemma, that, you know, we don't give those answers. We might have the answers, or we might think we have the right answer for them, but actually it's a journey in listening. Now, trying to listen to the stories and equally get an outcome of an agreed narrative or agreed wording for narrative was very difficult. We came to what we believed was the best agreed narrative, and I still think it was a very beautiful narrative. It was a very human narrative, because we believed that it did represent the stories we had heard. And we believed that it would might not bring, but it could bring a sense of healing for people to be able to go and sit in that garden and read those stories, read their own stories. I remember somebody saying about peacemaking, and you know, it's not like you just come in and switch on a light in a room and the light comes on. He said you have to go into the back to all the wires. It's very complex. And it's perplexing, you know, and there is that sense of, this is not simple. There is not just this and that. There's a lot of grey stuff in there. There was a real conversation between the three of us around whether we would use the word terrorist. And we eventually came to the thinking that no, we didn't want the word terrorist on it. We wanted an act of terror rather than to label someone terrorist, because those, you know, although we wouldn't condone what was done, we didn't want to label people terrorists. We wanted to change that language a little bit. You know, and I know that was hard for some people to take in Omagh. This was my first big project. Never done anything like this before. We were looking at legacy of the past, and this was an example of how Amish community dealt with a school shooting in their community. Originally, the title was to be Forgiveness, a Step Too Far. And then as I talked with the community here, I said, let's not take that, let's not go down that word, forgiveness. And I think that was a big learning around working in community development and good relations is, you know, it's not my agenda. It's what the community want. I'm the public servant. They're the ones who will own this. It was a 3-day conference. Now, this was huge for me. I'd never done anything like this in my life. To organise a 3-day conference, and I mean, by nature, I'm a disorganised person. I was the fluffy sort of person who had the vision, shared the vision with a few others, and this is what we came up with. Do you know, I can't believe how well it was attended, and I was really only new here, but everybody seemed to love it. I'm not a big event person, but I actually surprised myself that I could do this. And part of me is very chaotic, but that chaos in some ways I've come to appreciate about myself, because it does mean that, well, my focus and my strength is certainly not in admin. I mean, what I learned from that yes, it's okay to have a vision, Olive, but there's a process. Now, thank goodness I had Liz, who was the process person and kept me straight and on the straight and narrow, because I could have been way off on all sorts of tangents, such as who I am. Anyway, we had a great conference. Having all those people together in one building was a real privilege, and it was very humbling too. We had decided this is what we were going to do. We were going to collect the stories of 5 different men. Now, forgive me, I couldn't find a woman. I would have if I could have, but it happened to be 5 different men. The first thing I would sort of say, it was a real risk for us to do here. And the men took a real risk about sharing their real story. They'd all been part of the Troubles in Lurgan at a time, and they'd all very different stories. The men came in here to Jethro, to a private room, to tell their story. They would have come in 2, 3, 4 times a week, sat up in the cafe or in a room in Jethro and told their story. And so eventually we got our shadowed past. They chose our shadowed past because they said it is in the past, it was a shadowed past, we have now moved on. But I really admire those men. That must have been hard for them. Having those men together and tell very different experiences. Again, it led to understanding. It's a book I am so proud of. So proud of the men having done that. That's part of the amazing sort of thing with good relations work. You start something off and you have no idea where it's going to end. And that was a bit like the shared education programme. It started off with 3 of us sitting over umpteen cups of coffee upstairs in the cafe. And then the next thing would be, what do you think? Maybe we could. Will we? Yes, we will. At that time, it wasn't shared education. It was these 2 teachers who said, we want to bring these students together. Intentionally, I had the buses coming here because I wanted these young people, especially from St. Ronan's College, to come and get a sense of the flavour of Jethro. It was the first time some of those young Catholic students had crossed across to South Lurgan, and they were nervous, but they did it. The thing is, they did it. So it was so beautiful to see that foyer packed with young people with different uniforms. I loved that diversity. I would have hated if they were all one uniform, even if they were all different but all one uniform. We're beginning to think about how do we embed this more in community life rather than just school community. So that again is where Jethro came in, where we built connections in the community, and it became rather than just a school thing, it became a Lurgan project. From that then, it just flourished. The shared education programme flourished. It was something to do with the people, the passion, the enthusiasm, the creativity, the co-creativity. This shared education programme ended up telling their story to 19,000 people in an Esri conference in San Diego. And whenever I arrived in Quaker House, the worker before me had this idea of making a quilt. I thought, making a quilt? I can't even know how to thread a needle. And of course I thought I was going to have to be a sewer and be all part of this. But actually, you know, it wasn't like that at all. Well, it took about 6 months to actually create the momentum. So we would have gone to West Belfast, and we would have had sessions in East Belfast and sessions in North Belfast. Now, at the beginning, the tension, you know, the tension was palpable because these women really had never crossed over the areas in Belfast before. In fact, if I remember right, I remember one group of women saying that just the summer before they'd been clodding stones at the other side. And here they were now. It was hard, and I was nervous. I know the colleague I was working with was nervous. But again, we did it. And, you know, we knew that these women would not come to any harm. So we brought the women into the different centres. I think we had 32 different squares from women from the very different traditions, all with theirs. And they chose to call it our Shared Visions Quilt. And we launched it in Stormont with cross-party support. That was beautiful for the women. As far as I'm aware, that quilt travels the world as a tool for peacemaking. How do we help each other, genuinely help each other to feel safe? And I think that was part of what Jethro has done. It has genuinely helped people to feel safe. How do we support each other to say, I will keep you safe, as far as is humanly possible. I'll keep you safe in this place. And so that builds confidence, and it also builds trust around, you know, that relationship. As I go along, it is about co-creating with people. And we can co-create with anyone. It doesn't have to be specific people. We also lost our sense of creativity. I think we were all watching our backs so much that we couldn't open our arms at all and push back. You know, the very idea of pushing back and just opening our arms and, yeah, being more open to things. And I think that too is part of peacemaking, co-creating. It is about co-creating because I can't create something for somebody else. They've got to come in and help me. And I suppose we go back to this thing of, I need your help. You know, and it's the whole thing of we are interdependent. I am dependent on you, and you are dependent on me. And together we are in this. Everybody has a part to play in it. And yes, there are some of those of us who may have gained skills along the road. Do you know what? Skills are okay. It's about being 110% human. And I don't mean 100%, 110% human. Because you have to go that extra 10% to understand and walk. I mean, we talk about walking in somebody else's shoes. You can't walk in somebody else's shoes unless you really know them and unless you can really feel that. And do you know, one of the things I think we lost during the Troubles, and it's probably a natural thing, was our sense of feeling. You know, we just lost that. I used to waking up and think, oh, there's another one, another bomb, more people killed, live life. But I think we lost our sense of feeling, and look, that's a natural thing. Whenever one is in tough situations, don't try to fix people. Accept them and realise I don't like to be fixed either. Just travel the journey with me, and let's see where we get to. And I think that, you know, is part of good relations. It's the thinking. Have you thought of? Do you know, I didn't see it like that before. Or I didn't think of that. And suddenly there are light bulbs go on, and there's almost like a flick of a switch, and there's all these lights flashing. I think, where did that come from? Where did that come from? That level of understanding doesn't come easily. And it doesn't come without building huge trust with people where you know your story's safe And I think that's one of the things that was a vision for me in Jethro. I want people's stories to be safe. It's their story. It's valid. And they, as a human being, are worthy of being listened to. Good relations to me is about being true to oneself. It's about being authentic. It's about listening to a different story. It's about working with people who are different from ourselves. And that's not always easy, because we all come with our own mindsets. And I know I had mine, and I wanted to push and shove people down a road that I wanted to go. Didn't work. And I think that was part of my own learning. You know, Olive, you can't push and shove people. They're human like you are. And they also want to go places, but it mightn't be the place that you want to take them.